Okay, everyone. So today we will review chapter 10 and 11. Okay, and this review is for exam number 4. Okay, so exam number 4 will be over chapter 10 and 11. Okay, so exam 4. Okay, we start with chapter 10, which is muscle or muscle tissue. Okay, so for number 1, question number 1, the scientific study of muscle is called myology. Myo mean muscles, and logy or logos mean science of. And remember, there are 3 types of muscle tissue. The first one is skeletal muscles. This is all the muscle that attach to the bone or skeleton. All of them will be striped, yes, striated. And all the skeletal muscle, this is the only one that is voluntary. Okay, so only skeletal muscle are voluntary muscle. Voluntary muscle means you can control their contractions. So if you wish to contract your skeletal muscle, you will be able to do it because it is voluntary. The second type is called the cardiac muscles, located in the wall of the heart. So this is the heart muscle. It's also stripes, but the action is involuntary. So you cannot control the cardiac muscle contraction. So you cannot, for example, stop the contraction or start the contraction. It will contract automatically. Okay, so this is involuntary. The smooth muscle, this is the third type of muscles, location mostly on the wall of hollow organs. Okay, so this is tract organs like GI tract organ, esophagus, stomach, intestine. Okay, so this is the smooth muscle. They have the smooth muscle on the wall of this tract organ. Respiratory tract, the trachea, bronchioles, bronchus, urinary tract, ureter, bladder, urethra, and also the blood vessels. Okay, so blood vessel has smooth muscles on the wall, on its wall. And also it's attached to the hair follicles, and also is located on the eyes, is control the lens accommodation, and also the opening of the pupil. Okay. So these are the location for the smooth muscle. And the name is telling you it is not stripes. So this is smooth, non-striated, it's smooth. And it is also involuntary. Just like the cardiac muscle, you cannot control the contraction of this smooth muscle. So make sure you know the differences between these 3 types of muscle for your exam. Which one has stripes? Which one voluntary, for example? Okay. Functions of muscle tissue. These are the several functions of muscle tissue. Skeletal muscle, for example, is used for body movement. So we're able to move because of contraction of our skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle also used for stabilize our body position. You're able to stand up, sit down, etc. is due to the skeletal muscle. Regulating the volume, like the cardiac muscles, is regulates the heart volume by pumping the blood. Smooth muscle also regulate the volume of food in the stomach, for example. The volume of air in the lungs. This is also controlled by smooth muscle. Movement within the body, like cardiac muscles, smooth muscle, they're able to move air, oxygens, food, and etc. within their wall. And producing the heat, this is mostly skeletal muscles. When we feel cold, for example, the skeletal muscle can contract, shivering to increase body temperature. Several properties of muscle tissue. The first one, excitement, excitability. Is respond to the chemical signal coming from neurons. Conductivity, so they're able to conduct the electricity, electrical signals like sodium ions can move from one muscle cell to another muscle cell. Contractility, of course, this is the main property of muscle. It's able to contract. What is contract mean? It means the muscle become shorter. When the muscle shorten, then it will generate the power, the force. Extensibility, the ability to stretch. So our muscle able to stretch, not only to shorten, but also to stretch. And elasticity, the ability to return to the original shape after stretching or after contraction. These are the property of muscle. The individual of muscle cell is called myofiber. Sometimes it's also called myocyte. Is another name, and sometimes also called the muscle fiber, because it is long like a fiber. And of course, it is also called the muscle cell. Okay, so these are the several names of the muscle cell. Okay, myocyte, myofiber, muscle fiber, muscle cell, they're all the same. And the bundles of muscle cells or muscle fiber is called the fascicle. As a fascicle is bundle of many muscle cells. The cell membranes of muscle cell is called the sarcolemma. So it has special name. It's called sarcolemma. So this sarcolemma is similar as a cell membrane for other cell. Okay, so sarcolemma is the cell membrane of the muscle cell. The cytoplasm is called the sarcoplasma. Okay, so sarcoplasma is actually the cytoplasms of the muscle cell. And sarcoplasma, inside the sarcoplasma, you have a some spatial components, like the myofilaments or myofibrils, mostly actin and myosin. So actin is the thin filament, and myosin is the thick filament. Okay, and then I'm gonna make it bigger. Okay, so maybe this one is good. And then there's a spatial structure is called the myoglobins. Remember, hemoglobin is the same type of proteins. Hemoglobins is a protein that carry oxygen in the blood. And because this is myoglobin, so this is molecule that carry oxygen in the muscle cell. Right? Nucleus, yes, this is the control center of the cell. Skeletal muscle, it has more than one nucleus per cell. Mitochondria, this is the organelle that produce ATP. Most of muscle cell will have more mitochondria compared to other type of cell, especially the cardiac muscle. It has so many mitochondria because remember, heart muscle, they never stop contraction. Spatial reticulum is called the Sarcoplasmic Reticulum or SR. This is special organelle that store calcium. Okay, so this is calcium stored inside the muscle cell. And this special chemical called the glycogen that is actually consists of many glucoses. So this is the storage for glucoses. Okay, so this is carbohydrate or glucose storage. So these are the sum of special components inside the sarcoplasm. The sarcoplasm. The unit that contract, okay, so the contractile unit of muscle cell is called sarcomeres. Okay? There are millions of sarcomeres in the muscle cell. So each of these has the ability to contract. So therefore it's called the contractile unit. This contractile unit consists of filaments, arrangement of actin and myosin. And this is the one that gives the stripes appearance on the muscles tissue under the microscope. So in the sarcomere, so each sarcomere border with protein is called the Z-disc. So this is Z-disc. Okay, and in the middle there will be M line. So this is M line in the middle. Okay, and then from the N line there will be thick proteins. Okay, so thicker protein. And this thicker protein will have head at the end. Okay, so head. So this thicker protein is called myosin. Okay, so this myosin anchor into the M line. And there is another protein which is thinner. This thinner protein anchor into the Z-disc. Okay, and this thinner protein is called actin. Okay, and if you see this head of the myosin will bind to the actin. Okay, so it has binding site to bind to the actin. Okay, myosin head bind to the actin. So we have M line, Z-disc, myosin, and actin. So this thick line over here will make an arrangement, making what we call the A band. This is A band, which is the band of darker color. And from here to here is going to be thinner color or lighter color. Is going to be the high band. Okay. And then the edge zones will be the zone of stretching. and between this Z disc and with the other C disc. So these are the part of the sarcomere that you see under the microscopes. It's going to be stripes because of the A and I band. Okay, darker, lighter, and then it's going to be darker, lighter. Three classes of muscle proteins. And the first one is the contractile protein. Of course, this is actin and myosin. This is the one that contract. The regulatory proteins, tropomyosin and troponin. Both of these regulatory protein is actually located on this actin. Okay, so actin will have also tropomyosin and the troponin. And the structural proteins like the M line, the Z, nebulin, and etc. This is part of the structural protein. Now for the myosin, so this is the thick filament, and the thin filament is called the actin. The protein that has the calcium binding site, this is troponin, and again troponin is actually part of the actin protein. And tropomyosin is the protein that block the myosin binding site, and this is also part of the actin. So this is actually a group of proteins in the thin filament. Okay, actin, troponin, and tropomyosin. This is part of the thin filament protein. Titin, myosin, nebulin, dystrophin, they're all the structural protein that help the sarcomere in place. The muscle contraction theory is actually sliding filament theory. Okay, so the actin, okay, I said this is this is Z disc, this is the M line, this is the myosin. Myosin head will bind to the actin, and this myosin then will pull the actin into the middle. The same thing over here, there will be myosin head. This is the Z disc, and this is actin. Okay, so the myosins will pull this actin from its side into the middle. It's making shorter. So this is what we call the sliding filament theory. Okay, the neurotransmitters, which is actually acetylcholine, ACH, will be released in the NMJ. What is NMJ? This is the neuromuscular junction. So this is junctions between neuron, motor neuron, and muscle. And sometimes it is also known as a synapse. Synapse is a space that located between neuron and the muscle. So the acetylcholine will be released in this synapse, in this NMJ. So that's the name of the neurotransmitter. And this is the one that will order the muscle to perform contraction. And then this acetylcholine, when it is attached to the sarcolemma, okay, the receptor on the sarcolemma, it will open the sodium channel, and sodium will enter into the muscle cell. It increases the electricity. Okay, so this is called the conduction. Okay, conduction. Okay, conduction or impulses that will increase the electricity inside the muscle cell. So when the sodium enter into the muscle cell, into the sarcoplasm, it will trigger the release of calcium that is stored in the SR. Right? So that's the connection of sodium enter into the sarcoplasm. It will trigger the opening of calcium channel in the SR, Sarcoplasmic Reticulum, and the Sarcoplasmic Reticulum open, and then calcium then will be out from the SR. Okay. So this calcium then go to the troponin. Okay. So this is the protein that has the binding site, calcium binding site. Okay. So whenever the calcium bind to the troponin, it will refill the myosin binding site, open the myosin binding site. Okay. So the ion that bind troponin is the calcium, which is released from the SR. Okay, steps of contraction cycle. There are 4 steps. First, the Atp hydrolysis. This is when the ATP release one of the phosphate become ADP, and then that release of one phosphate from ATP will make the head, okay, so this is myosin head, to bend, okay, and attach, start to attach to the actin, okay, and then after that it's gonna be making the cross bridge, which is so the attachment of myosin head to the actin. So this is the cross bridge. And then after that, this myosin will pull the actins to this side, to the middle. And this is what we call the power stroke. Okay. After that, the ATP will come again. Okay. And when the ATP bind to the myosin head, it will detach the bridge, the cross bridge. Therefore, the muscle will be relaxed. This is the reason why if somebody passes away, for example, the ATP will not produce. It's going to be less in number. And then that person will have stiff muscle. And this is what we call the rigor mortis. The same thing if someone, the athlete, for example, doing exercise for a long time, they might get cramp. Because what? Because the ATP is actually will not produce during that time because oxygen is very, very limited. And then when the ATP production is less in the muscle cell, it can cause cramp. Okay, so rigor mortis. When somebody die like zombie, it will have what we call the rigor mortis, muscle stiffness and cramps. Okay, it's mostly caused by the limited production of ATP. There are some chemicals that can mess up the contraction, like for example, Botox, botulinum toxin. This toxin is produced by bacteria. It can paralyze the muscle, so muscle become paralyzed because this Botox actually block the release of acetylcholine. And it is very, very dangerous if the muscle that paralyzes our diaphragm, the muscle that used for breathing. Okay. Curare is the same, also causing paralysis on the muscle. However, the action is different. Curare will block the ACH receptor. So acetylcholine will be released, but there is no receptor because of blocked by this curare. So the end result will be the same, which is paralyzed. The other one over here, neostigmine, is actually the chemical that causes the muscle keep contracting. Because what? Because this neostigmine will inhibit the ACH esterase. The function of acetylcholine esterase is to destroy the acetylcholine, to break down the acetylcholine. So when we perform contraction, we need acetylcholine. But we also need relaxation, right? So in order to perform relaxation, then the acetylcholine esterase will break down the acetylcholine, therefore will be relaxed. If we don't have this acetylcholine esterase, then acetylcholine will keep increasing in the synapse, and it might cause the tetanus, which is the muscle keep contracting, and it is dangerous too. There are 4 sources of ATP. First, any ATP available in the sarcoplasm, but this is only used for 2 maybe seconds. So that's it. And then from creatine phosphate, maybe until 10 seconds. And sometimes it is enough for sprinter to use ATP from creatine phosphate. So they can sprint 100 meters in 10 seconds, for example. But for longer action, maybe minute, hours, for example, action that need longer time, from minute to hour, the ATP has to be produced or coming from this reaction. Is called the aerobic cellular respiration. This is happenings in mitochondria. So mitochondria will produce ATP for longer muscle action. So there's the reason why, remember that cardiac muscle, they have a lot of mitochondria in order to produce a lot of ATP that keep the cardiac muscle contraction forever. And then this mitochondria, of course, in order to produce ATP, it requires oxygen and glucose. So that's the reason why most of the oxygen that we breathe is actually going to the cardiac muscle because it's needed, and also to the brain because brain also require a lot of energy, a lot of ATP. For the muscle cell, let's say the athlete perform the action for longer time, like cross country, for example, they might be gasping. When they are gasping, limited oxygens enter into the body. It will not go to the muscle cell, skeletal muscles. It might go to the cardiac muscle and brain, but no, not to the skeletal muscle. But skeletal muscle, they cannot produce ATP from oxygen because no more oxygen, but they still be able to produce it from process called the fermentation or non-aerobic cellular respiration. But this fermentation is really non-efficient, only produce 2 ATP per glucose, and it's also produce toxic chemical. It's called the lactic acid. And then because of that, usually the muscle, skeletal muscle will stop contraction. And this is what we call the muscle fatigue. So this is actually preventive action in order to keep our muscles healthy, is not broken. If we continue exercise, for example, it might break the muscle. The motor unit is actually one somatic motor neuron plus all the muscle fiber that it innervates. So one motor unit, one somatic motor neuron, and all the fiber that it innervates. A twitch is a brief contraction of single action potential, and usually it is meaningful. It's not meaningful, so there is no meaning. It's just twitching. There's nothing. Refractory period is the time when the muscle will not respond to any action potential. So the contraction step or cycle is actually have 4 of them. The latent periods, this is when the calcium being released from SR. So if it is like this, it's going to be the latent period over here, number 1. And then after that, contraction period, okay, maybe about 10 seconds. So this is number 2. This is when the sliding filament is happening. Okay? And then the relaxation period, okay, it's going to be number 3 over here. It's about 10 seconds also. This is when the calciums will be transported back to the SR. And then after that, number 4 here will be the refractory period. And this is when the muscle is not responding to any other stimulus. So this is one contraction. This is one twitch. And usually it is not meaningful. In order to make a meaningful contraction, you have to put another twitch over here, another twitch over here, another twitch over here. And finally, you're going to have strong, meaningful contraction. And the additional twitch to many other twitches is called the wave summation. Okay, so wave summation is adding hundreds of twitches together to give the force and meaningful contraction. The motor unit recruitment, this is many wave summations in one place in order to give a skillful movement. Okay, like for example, in our finger, we can move finger too many directions to perform a lot of skillful action, because there are a lot of motor unit recruitment in this finger area. Tone, there are 2 types, isotonic contraction and isometric contraction. Isotonic means the muscle tone while the moving the load. Okay, like for example, when we holding something over here in our hand and we move it up, there is a contraction in this shoulder muscle, I mean in the bicep, for example. This is what we call the isotonic contraction. Okay, so the isometric contraction is similar. Okay, let's say this is bicep and this is something, things that we hold. So even though we do not move this hand, this object, this muscle keep contracting too. There is no movement, but the muscle still contracted. And this is what we call the isometric contraction here. Contractions of muscle without moving object. Now classification of fiber. So red meat, pink meat, and white meat. Okay. So the first one is the red meat. So red meat is actually strong twitch muscle. Okay, so this is red meat. Pink meat is fast twitch A between oxidative and glycolytic. And the last one is the white meat. This is the fast muscle. This is fast glycolytic. So just compare, like for example, chicken. So chicken mostly will have the white meat. So they're gonna move very fast, faster, but they gonna be tired easily. They cannot move all day. Okay, so they get tired. So this is white meat. So people that have more white meat, they are very, very active. The slow twitch, the red meat over here, just say the cow, or the cow. They are very big. They mostly have red meat. So they move slowly, but they are very strong. They can have longer contraction for longer time. So people that have more red meat, okay, the slow oxidative muscle, they will have stronger contraction for longer time, but slow. Okay? So the dark red, this is red because they have more myoglobin. Okay, more myoglobin on the muscle, on the muscle cell. The white meat, they have less myoglobin. The ATP synthesis in cardiac muscle mainly, of course, through the aerobic cellular respiration. Therefore, cardiac muscle has more mitochondria in order to produce this ATP. Okay? And also, this is the reason why the cardiac muscle need more oxygen. Okay? If we don't get enough oxygen to the cardiac muscle will die. Okay? We will have the heart attack. Okay, now, yes, the cardiac muscle has more mitochondria, need more oxygen compared to the skeletal muscle. Cardiac muscle fibers are known as autorhythmic fiber. It means that they will start by itself. There is no brain control for starting cardiac muscle contraction. Smooth muscle, there are two types. Okay, single unit smooth muscle and multi-unit smooth muscle. The single unit usually located in the wall of the hollow organs, GI tract, respiratory tract, urinary tract organs. The multi-units mostly located separately, like in erector pili under the skin. Iris is the one that controls the eye opening, the pupil opening. Now for the smooth muscle, the muscle that binds calcium is not troponin, but it is called the calmodulin. The different name, different action actually. The only muscle that can repair itself is the smooth muscle. So smooth muscle is the blood vessel, for example, when it is broken, when we are bleeding, the blood vessel broken, it can be repaired because it has the ability to repair. The other two types of muscle, skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle, cannot be repaired. When it is broken, it becomes scar tissue. So if someone have a lot of dead cardiac muscle, they require heart transplantation. Otherwise, they will die. Some disorders of muscle tissue, myasthenia gravis. This is autoimmune disease. So our antibodies actually blocking the ACE8 receptor, and then the muscle become very, very weak, paralyzed. Muscular dystrophy, this is muscle that's destroying itself, and mostly this is male because inherited to the X chromosome. So mostly male patients. Okay, so males that have this problem with the muscular dystrophy. Spasm is involuntary contraction of single muscle. Tic, involuntary twitching of muscle. Sometimes we twitch our eyes. Tremor, it is a rhythmic involuntary contraction. Vasculation, involuntary twitch of the motor unit. Atrophy, this is wasting away of muscle. This means that if our muscle never use or disuse, then the muscle becomes smaller, and this is what we call the atrophy. The opposite of atrophy is hypertrophy, which is overuse of muscle. It is caused by overuse of muscle. The muscle become very big because there are so many fibers, bigger fibers, like for example, bodybuilder, they will have what we call the hypertrophy. And rigor mortis, I mentioned before, this is happening when somebody die and they are in the contraction mode, then the muscle keep contracting for 24 or 48 hours. This is due to the limited number of ATP produced when somebody pass away. Okay, we're done with chapter 10. Now we go to chapter 11, which is the muscular system. Just remember, muscular system is only talking about the voluntary muscle, which is what? The skeletal muscle. So there are more than or about 700 skeletal muscle in our body, and each of them has their own name, right? Like bicep, tricep, pec muscle, frontal muscles, femoris muscle, quadriceps. So they have their own name, about 700 of them. And there is a tough connective tissue that connects muscle to the bone, and this tissue is called the tendon. Okay, so if we look at the muscles, and there are three parts actually. Okay, the muscle part or the mid part is called belly. Okay, and the end part is called tendon. Okay, so one tendon here and another tendon over here. Okay, so remember, tendon is the connective tissue that connect muscle to the bone. Okay, and this is gonna be, let's say, another bone over here. Okay, so it's connected by these tendons, so two positions. Now, let's say this bone is able to move, like the flexion or maybe extension. Then the tendon that attaches to the movable bone is called insertion. Okay, and the tendon that attaches to the immovable bone, so this one over here, so this tendon is called the origin. Okay, so origin, insertion. Now the mechanical system of moving our body is called the lever system, and lever system consists of four parts: the bone itself, so this is bone over here that moving, so there is a joint between this bone, and this bone is called the lever, the rigid bone. The point of movement, the fixed point over here, is called the fulcrum, mostly joint. And then resistance is called the load. So like, for example, this area over here actually have weight. So this is the load. And the effort is done by this muscle contraction. So this is effort. Okay, so four components of lever system. There are three types of lever system. Okay, first class lever, which is EFL. So the effort comes first, the fulcrum in the middle, and load at the end. Second class level, FLE, the fulcrum first, load in the middle, and effort at the end. And the third class level, FEL, the fulcrum first, effort in the middle, and load at the end. Type of coordinations within the muscle group may be synergistic, antagonistic, and fixator. There is one more, is actually called the agonist or prime mover, which is the main muscle that produce movement. Okay, now synergistic muscle, for example, between the bicep and brachialis, okay, bicep and brachialis, that's a synergistic muscle because these two muscles will move our elbow up, flex our elbow. Okay, so this bicep and brachialis will flex elbow, and both of them is called the synergistic muscle. Okay, antagonistic muscle is the two muscles that opposite one another. Like, for example, in our elbow. In our upper arm over here, we have bicep and tricep on the back. Okay, so when we flex our elbow, the bicep will contract, the triceps should relax. Okay? So this is what we call the antagonistic muscle. When we extend our elbow, the tricep contract, the bicep relax. And this is antagonistic muscle. Fixator is a group of muscle that fix our bones in place. So when we move our shoulder, for example, there are many muscles on the back that will keep our shoulder joint in place. And this group of muscle is called the fixator. Okay, muscle of facial effervescence or orbiculis oculi. This is the one that close the eye. Levator open the eye, the eyelid. Orbiculis oris, this is circular muscles in the mouth used for kissing. Vaccinator, this is muscle in the cheek that used for whistling, blowing, suckling, and chewing. There are 6 extrinsic muscles. There are 4 rectus, straight muscle. On the top is called the superior rectus, at the bottom is inferior rectus. Let's say this is eyeball in the middle over here. Okay, and let's say this is nose, then this one's going to be medial rectus, this is going to be lateral rectus. This is superior, inferior rectus. So these are the 4 rectus muscles. There are 2 oblique. So oblique means diagonal muscle. Okay, and this also will move the eyeball. Okay, so 6 eyeball muscle, the muscle that move the eyeball. The one that move the mandible, the lower jaw, masseter, temporalis, and pterygoid. Muscle of the tongue, gonna be 4, and with glossus. Glossus means tongue. Okay, so genioglossus, styloglossus, palatoglossus, and hyoglossus. 4 muscles that move the tongue. When we talk, when we eat, they're all moving our tongue. Muscle in the floor of the mouth, digastric, mylohyoid, and stylohyoid muscle. Primary muscle that move our head. This is the big one over here. Sternocleidomastoid muscle and scalene muscles. This is the one that helped. Okay. Muscle of the ab. So this is the ab muscles, external oblique, internal oblique, and transverse. These 3 is actually in one area, on the side area. So there are going to be 3 layers of muscle. The rectus abdominis, this is the one that is in the middle, and this is the one that usually give the six-pack appearance if you exercise correctly. If not, it's become just 1 pack. It's coming from this rectus abdominis. Primary muscle that used for breathing, diaphragm, external intercostal muscles, and internal intercostal muscle. These 2 over here is synergistic muscle. They contract together for inhale. To take the air, so for breathing, breathe in. The internal intercostal muscle, this is when it is contracted, it's gonna be exhale. Exhalation, breathe out. Okay, and then muscle of the pelvic floor, levator ani coccygeus, muscle of perineum, male and female, gonna be external urethral sphincter. This is in the urethra. Ischiocavernosus and bulbospongiosus. This is the top triangle. And the bottom triangle will be external anal sphincter. Muscle that move the arms, pectoralis majors in the front, latissimus tertii on the back, deltoid, shoulder, supra, infra, and subscapularis is on the side. Teres major also on the side. Bicep brachialis. This is synergistic muscle that flex the elbow. And then synergistic muscle that extend the elbow. It's going to be tricep and anconis. Okay. So this is extends the elbow. Okay, extension. Muscle that pronate and flex the wrist. Okay. So the one that pronate is called the pronator. The one that flex is called flexor. Muscle that supinate and extend the wrist. The one that supinate is called supinator. The one that used for extension is called extensor. Okay. Tough connective tissue on the wrist, okay, front and back, is called retinaculum. On the palm area is called the flexor retinaculum. On the back of your palm, the wrist on the back of your palm is called the extensor retinaculum. Muscle that move our vertebrae, bend our body, for example, spinalis, iliocostalis, and longissimus muscle. Muscle that cross the hip joint, iliopsoas muscle. Quadriceps femoris, this is big muscles on the thigh. And adductor muscle, this is also on the thigh, but inside of your thigh. Okay. Quadriceps femoris, it has 4 groups. Rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, and vastus medialis. All of them is part of the quadriceps femoris group. Muscle of the butt or buttock is gluteal muscle. There are 3 of them: gluteus maximus, medius, and minimus. And then hamstring muscle, it is the one that located on the back of our thigh. It has 3 muscles: semifemoraneous, semitendinous, and bicephalus. This is hamstring muscle. Muscle that move the legs or hip. Yeah, I think we already talked about this one: iliacus, psoas, quadriceps, adductor muscles. They all move our hip. Compartment of the thigh. If we cut our thigh cross section, then there will be 3 main compartments. On the anterior and lateral side, it will be consist of this quadriceps femoris muscle. On the medial side, inside, it's gonna be adductor muscles. And on the back of our thigh, it's gonna be hamstring muscle. Then muscle on the calf, on the back, the biggest one is gastrocnemius, and there will be plantaris, soleus, tibialis posterior, flexor digit. Okay, they are on the back of our leg. Muscle in the front of our leg, the biggest one is tibialis anterior. There's going to be extensor for digit. Group of muscle that move the big toe is called the hallucis muscle. The one that used for movement of the little toes is called the digiti minimi muscle. The 3 main sites of IM injection, gluteus medius, this is the medium part on the side, on the side of our buttock. And then vastus lateralis, which is part of the quadriceps femoris muscles on the side. And of course, the most common one is the deltoid muscle located in the shoulder muscle. Okay, so this is shoulder muscle, and these are the 3 common sites for IM injection. I think that's all for this review. Study well, okay, chapter 10 and 11 before taking your exam number 4. Good luck.